What would God create? What would that infinite of infinites God? What would that God that is the infinite of infinites use to create the world or any of this material? We back everybody with another reflection on the Daily Vedantic. So Advaita Vedanta, this philosophy that we talk about here on this channel every day, is in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophies, is technically a non-theistic philosophy. You have theistic philosophies, traditions, religions. You have atheistic philosophies, traditions, maybe not many traditions, and certainly no religions, but philosophies that have no theistic God. And then you have this third bucket that is so rarely talked about, which is called non-theistic. Vedanta would be in there. Buddhism would be in there. Spinoza's God, the insanely smart Enlightenment figure, the Western Enlightenment era figure, Spinoza. And this third bucket of non-theistic view of the world, in very simple terms, is that something like Advaita Vedanta doesn't believe in a God 1,000 feet up into the sky that's 10,000 feet tall with a big gray beard. Talked about this recently with Dr. John Vervaeke, the professor, cognitive scientist, philosopher, psychologist from University of Toronto, who was here for the Venice Vedanta Club meeting about 2 or 3 weeks back that we recorded the episode, and that should be out soon. And we talked about this third bucket, this non-theistic view of the world. This view has hundreds of millions of people that have this view in the world, but I never heard this view in the West. I always just thought it was this very simple dichotomy that every idea fit between theism or atheism. That you were either theistic or atheistic. That you believed in God or you didn't believe in God. Had no clue that there was this other option, non-theism. I still don't even think about this term that much, but from a technical perspective, it is quite fascinating. Non-theism is not that there is no God, but that there is no external God out there, up in the sky or in the cosmos somewhere, or 3 feet from you. That there is no personal God outside of yourself. If all is God, that would be non-theistic, because there is no extrinsic God apart from the world, that theistic view. Therefore, you have this third bucket, non-theistic view. And it is the false dichotomy that we inherited from the Enlightenment era, when people started to question the theistic view. This false dichotomy, meaning that this view that there's only two choices, is completely false. We inherited it over the last few hundred years from some brilliant thinkers, but it was limited thinking, giving us just two options when, well, there are more than just two. And then we inherit those worldviews. We don't even realize we inherit and just think, oh yeah, there's basically two major worldviews, and within each, there's hundreds, maybe a couple thousand different flavors within each, but they all have one of these two views. And then one gets exposed to something like Advaita Vedanta that says, well, all is God. If God is infinite, then by definition, there can't be something that isn't God. If God is the infinite of infinites, God can't stop where this chair begins, can't stop where James's skin begins. What would God create? What would that infinite of infinites God? What would that God that is the infinite of infinites use to create the world or any of this material? Well, obviously it would be God's stuff. And that's what Vedanta says. There is only the infinite. Brahman is Sanskrit for the vast. There is only the vast. There is only infinitude that you can try to slap on some linguistic labels to. God, Brahman, enlightenment, self-realization, liberation, Turiya. You could slap on Satchit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. But whatever it is certainly transcends anything to do with language. And yet language is quite practically helpful. In the same way that this philosophical tradition says that devotion to a practice, which is by definition dualistic, devotion to a teacher, dualistic, devotion to even a personal God, extremely valuable, but dualistic, from the dual to the non-dual, from language to transcending beyond language. There is still immense value in all of this. But its value is in taking us beyond all of this. So back to this linguistic term, non-theism. One of the central non-theistic thinkers of the last 1,000 years in the West was Baruch Spinoza, sometimes labeled as Benedict Spinoza. And this figure is largely forgotten in the Enlightenment era, mainly because every side hated him. You have the Catholics that hated him, the theistic philosophers hated him, the atheistic philosophers hated him. And Dr. John Vervaeke talks about this in our conversation of just he was so unpopular by all sides that we largely have forgotten him, except in the last 100 years. Someone pretty prominent put him back on the map. Einstein famously subscribed to Spinoza's idea of God. He would say that his God was the God of Spinoza. When people would try to label him as atheistic, he would adamantly deny that label because he believed in something quite consequential beneath it all. It just might not have been a conventional view of God. So he leaned on the brilliance of the historical figure in Spinoza, and subscribing to that idea of a non-dualistic view of the world. No less reverence to a divine, if anything, such a reverence that it's all there is. As my teacher Joseph, when he's asked, do you believe in God? His answer is, I don't believe in anything else. And yet it's so counter to that bifurcation, that dichotomy. We're born and bred to believe in that there's really only two shades. You better fall in line with one of them. Theistic view, slap on whatever label, denomination you want. Atheistic view, and go and jump into that camp. And the growth of the awareness to this third bucket. Well, as one exposes themselves to this third option, maybe the best answer, the only answer, if you subscribe to this thought, when asked, do you believe in God? Is the answer Joseph gives. I don't believe in anything else. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.